I'm working from home again, this time because it's election day. So my three children who are of school age are not in school today. So we are trying to, my wife and I both work from home and keep them entertained and out of trouble at the same time. So here we are. Speaking of which, well, actually, I guess I won't do the first attendance word yet since it's not quite 10. I'll wait until 10 before I do that. But can go ahead and tell you this meeting should be pretty quick because there were no really big mistakes from Module 3. And the ones that were made were things that I already brought up beforehand from last week's meeting when I said, hey, watch out for this. So I'm going to try not to beat dead horses here today and go through it pretty quickly. That being said, it is 10 o'clock. So the first word for attendance is election, since today is election day. All right. Now, before I jump into anything, Chastity, since you're the only one here, do you have anything specific that you want me to address before I just kind of go through things methodically, like one at a time?
I don't really have anything specifically as of now. It's just a personal thing. I've recently taken on a new career, so I may be a little slow.
Oh, yeah, that can be tough. I understand.
Yeah, I met with my advisor yesterday and registered for classes, and I was like, hey, I don't mean to sound like, a slacker, but can I have easy stuff next semester?
No, that's good. I mean, that you know your limits. So that's a really good thing. And also, and I don't know if you did it or not, I can't remember, but if you have registered and you haven't sent me proof that you registered, you might consider that because, and I'm glad you said that because it's a good reminder to everybody. I will give you extra credit, 10 points of extra credit for registering for the next semester or applying for graduation for this semester, whichever.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. Do you want just a screenshot from my state, or do you want something?
Yeah, that'd be perfect, and that's a great question because some people have sent their advising worksheet, which is good, but that's not. I mean, you did that first step, but you're not quite registered yet. So, yeah, a screenshot that shows you're registered would be perfect.
Okay, and I'm on this home computer, and I don't really know how to do screenshots, so I'll figure that out today.
Okay, actually, funny you should mention that too, because I mean, not so much in this case, but generally speaking, I prefer instead of an actual screenshot, a picture, like you have your phone and take a picture of your computer. I usually prefer that more.
Okay.
And I would require that, but it's just too complicated. And the reason for that is like not for this case, not for this extra credit case, but like for those labs you do.
Yeah.
Almost always those screenshots are proof that you did the lab. So having a picture that includes your computer too helps me because then I can see at the bottom right, it'll have the date and the time. And because I'm sure I haven't been able to prove it, and I'm sure that some students have gotten pictures from their classmates, and I would be able to tell that. But sure. You don't need to worry about that. That's something I have to worry about later, and I don't want to waste any more of your time or anybody watching this video talking about that. But so any questions about that? Or are we good now?
No, I'll just send you an email later after the meeting. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So really quickly, in the same mistakes I mentioned previously are being made, so there's not much to say here. The biggest mistake, again, for Module 3 discussion was just not properly using a source. So again, I'll say, make sure every post, whether it be an initial post or reply, has a source. Make sure there's a working link to that source. Make sure it takes you to the direct website. So for example, if you wanted to cite the CDC, something specific, you wouldn't have that as your website, as your source, because that's just the homepage, right? You would do something specific. Does that make sense? I saw a lot of mistakes on that this week. What else to say? Every fact has to have a source. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, and another thing, I'm not sure if this was your section or a different section, but another common mistake is you should try to avoid using a book or a video as a source. So I'm not going to say you're not allowed, but you should try to avoid it. And if you do it, you need to get specific because I've mentioned before, I have like hundreds of discussions to grade every week. So if you use a video, you need to say, after you say, according to this video, and then maybe in parentheses put something like 2 minutes and 30 seconds in, or whatever it is. I need to be able to, like, I can't watch a whole video. So be specific. Or again, if you use an online book, you need to say, according to this book on this page. So be specific. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that was the biggest problem, again, is people not properly using sources. And because of it, actually, it was so overwhelming with the problem of people not properly using sources that I actually graded pretty loosely for people who did use sources for the most part. Now, I didn't realize that was a problem at the beginning. So some people at the beginning, I was a little bit pickier with them, which is not usually how I go. So I would ask them questions and be like, hey, well, could you clarify this or whatever? And so those people actually ended up getting a little extra credit, those people who did reply to my replies. Anyway, yeah, and that was the big thing. So again, just to reiterate, the idea here was we're talking about the environmental challenges of a declining population. The environmental challenges of an increasing population, but we're also recognizing the other challenges of a decreasing population, right? And then I think it was you who even mentioned stuff about that for the extra credit section, which brings up good points. And I'm just to be clear here, I wasn't saying you had to say that the government should, or you had the choice of should or should not. But again, you just needed to make sure you included the environment. Another big mistake, and I think then I'll be done talking about this discussion, is that make sure whenever you write your post, when you're done with it, make sure you check these things and make sure you didn't lose points. So for example, I think a lot of people lost points for this time. Not demonstrating that you understand the concept of worldwide population by at least defining it. But that was only 1 point usually. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Once again, I'll reiterate, just because we're done with this module 3 doesn't mean you can't go back and make corrections. So you can correct old posts or do new additional posts. Again, officially, I don't take late work, but unofficially, I promise I'll get to it as soon as I can, assuming I can. And so far, I have been able to. It's been a little bit slow, but I've been able to do it. So did you have any questions or comments about module 3 discussion?
I have no questions or comments. Really, I just added that extra credit because I was still thinking about it after I made the post. That's really my only thing, is I was like, what about this? And I just wanted to add it on there.
That was good. Yeah. And you got extra credit for it. And I hope my reply made sense to you.
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay. So lab 3, let's really quickly look at the lab that we just did. Again, this should be pretty quick because the mistakes that were made were the mistakes that I mentioned last week and said, hey, be careful for these mistakes. Most people got these questions okay, did okay with the pre-lab questions, proving that you watched the video. Here's where people get tricked. It's ask you, the first question is, do you think your textbook is, how do you think, how do you think your ecological footprint compares to the world average? And then it asks how it compares to the US average. And as you should know from last week's video and this pre-lab video and the textbook, the US on average has a larger ecological footprint than the rest of the world. Therefore, these two answers need to match each other. So for example, if you said your footprint is smaller than the world average, obviously it's going to be much smaller than the US average. Likewise, if you said that your ecological footprint was the same as the US average, obviously that's going to make it larger than the world average. So I did see a lot of mistakes on that one. Not a lot, but I saw some. And also a couple people forgot to put the Y. And just in case you're wondering, the reason we have the Y question is because honestly, I just want to make sure people are thinking, because it'll be really easy for someone to just do this lab and not even think and just write the word smaller here and smaller here, right? This forces you to think at least a little bit. Anyway, the next problems we saw were these next questions that come after these first two, where your answer to these are going to be compared to this, right? So again, just using this as an example, if you thought your footprint was larger than the world average, but smaller than the US average, which is a common guess, and should make sense, then these answers should make sense. They should fall between the world average and the US average. So for example, right here, US, the US was 4.94 Earths. or is it here? The entire U.S., the entire world population was 1.71. So again, if your first two questions indicated that they should have been, that you were in between the two, then this answer should have been somewhere between 1.71 and 4.94. And I'm not going to go through this for all of these, but same thing for this, right? Your number should in that case fall between. Same with this, right? Your answers should match the first two. That's it. Any questions about that portion of the lab? It was pretty straightforward. Okay, I will mention this really quickly. I think I may have mentioned this last week, but I don't remember for sure. But this question saying you will answer questions asked by an online calculator so that you can determine your footprint. I think I did bring this up. But anyway, I had a student sometime recently say something like calculators don't talk. So somehow they got focused on this question saying you will answer questions asked by an online calculator. And for some reason that just stuck in their head and they wrote, well, calculators don't talk. So anyway, and some more common mistakes. And these are big ones, oddly enough, big mistakes, because if you didn't do it, you got a 0, but easy mistakes to fix. So let's look at it really quickly. You need a screenshot, right? So after you go through the whole calculator, right, like it says right here, regardless of the extra credit that I described up there, you have to take a screenshot that shows the results, right? And then you answer the questions from that screenshot. And then it says right here, and this is where people mostly messed up. Then there's a second screenshot that you need, because remember, the results are kind of broken down into two different web pages, I guess you could say, 2 different graphics. So yeah, make sure that, if you got a 0.01 on your lab, that's probably why. Well, that is why, is because you didn't include those 2 screenshots. So just go back, do it again. What else? These are all pretty straightforward. Some common mistakes, like I predicted, was these are 3-part questions. So you had to make sure that you answered all 3 parts of the questions. A lot of mistakes were made here. Some people didn't fill this table out at all. Some people failed to fill out. More people failed to fill out the class average part, which means they probably also failed to fill out this with their information. A lot of people also forgot to do the graph, which is only 2 points, but still points were lost there. And again, some people failed to do this. The common mistake among people who did fail to do this was they messed this math up. So if you have a larger number here than you have here, then this number should be negative, right? This is why I gave you these examples. So a lot of times people had the wrong sign. It should have been negative. And then, other thing about the graph, always in this class, and I'll try to always remind you, but the x-axis is always going to be to your independent variable. So whenever there's a bar graph or a column chart, have whatever word you want to use to describe it, the bars should always go up and down, not left to right. So, in this case, there would be 6 bars on the x-axis, meaning 6 bars going up and down. So people did lose points for that. Also, make sure to label your graph, or title and label your graph. Most people did title it. Some people messed up the labeling. If what you're graphing the differences, right? So this is what you should have been graphing. And you know what? I'm going to change this to make it more obvious right now. This should say parentheses GHA like the rest of them do. But anyway, yeah, so on your y-axis, when you had those numbers, you also needed to indicate that was the difference in GHA. So a lot of people just failed to label their y-axis. Any questions about the graph or the tables? All right, pretty good. I don't think anybody took advantage of this extra credit, so there's nothing to mention there. I think everybody did a pretty good job with these 2 questions where it's like, hey, what do you think should remain legal and unregulated? And then right here, what do you think should be, or that's kind of backwards, sorry. This one says, what do you think should be legal and unregulated? And this one was saying, which of these do you think should be illegal or at least regulated? This was probably the best semester, I think, that I've seen with those 2 questions being answered. But here we did get some mistakes. I'm asking you for an incentive, right? So an idea of how to lower your footprint, and also an incentive. So maybe, again, I should maybe try to be more specific. And I tried to use this example, and I thought that example would give enough. But some people would say something like, oh, one incentive you could do to lower your carbon footprint is to give tax back, which is a great start, but for what? Like specifically, what could they do to lower their footprint? Like in this example I gave, the idea would be to have people use less grocery bags, and the incentive to do that would be what did I say, discount or something. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the point. And some people did miss points for that because you need not just the incentive, but the idea. So yeah, and again, anybody who messed that up can go back and fix it. Another mistake I'm seeing a lot of people make still, you need to save these files as PDFs before you upload them. If you don't know how, just click that link. It'll show you how. I know that sounds nitpicky, but hey, you're only losing 1 point if you mess it up. But sometimes, and you'll see later in the semester, if you mess that up, then when it's uploaded, I can't see a lot of stuff, and you're just going to lose a lot of points because a lot of your work will just be missing to no fault of your own, other than the fact that you didn't save it as a PDF before you uploaded it. Extra credit. I think that was it. Not much to say about that. So, are there any questions about Lab 3 before we move on to this upcoming module? All right, I'll take that as a no. So your second word for attendance will be the word vote. Just making sure I'm still recording and still displaying. Let's see, because I know there've been mistakes. Yep, still recording. All right. I assume you can still hear me. So here we go. Let's look at module 4 really quickly. Discussion 4. Once again, I can't reiterate this enough. You have to properly use a source. I won't grade anything unless you properly use a source. If you forget how, every single prompt has this link, right? You can just click it and it'll show you how to do it. So yes, make sure you properly use a source. That being said, let's look at some of this stuff. Chapter 8, you learned about the importance of conserving biodiversity. You also learned about U.S. policies for conserving biodiversity. For your post, write a formal letter to your legislator and explain one of the following. Why you support something that the government is already doing to conserve biodiversity. And it has to be real, so don't make something up like, I like the fact that you execute everyone who litters. Like that, first of all, that's a horrible thing in my opinion, but also it is not happening, right? So make sure it's real. As always, again, provide a reference. And if you don't want to write about that, you could come up with something, or you could talk about something the government is doing, or why you oppose it, right? So like, I realize you're doing this to conserve biodiversity, and conserving biodiversity is important, but here's why this is not a good idea. And maybe it's not a good idea because you think that it is actually hurting biodiversity, or maybe it's a bad idea because you just oppose it. Like, yeah, it may help biodiversity, but I oppose it. Again, using my extreme example previously, like if there was a policy where litterers got executed, I would write to the government and say, hey, I oppose that. Like, yeah, I hate litter, but man, you're taking it a little too far. And then finally, your third option is think of something that the government could do, but is not already doing. So obviously, if you come up with an idea, make sure you look it up to make sure that it is not already being done. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, that might be a good starting point. Sit back and think about some things that you think the government could do to increase biodiversity, and then look it up to see if they're already doing it. If they are, write about it. And if they're not, write about it. And again, you also have that other option where if you oppose something that they're already doing, talk about it. But again, regardless of all that, whether you oppose something or you think they should do something different, or you already love what you're doing, let me just skip down to this and focus on this. Let's look at the points here. Not indicating ways you'll lose points, not indicating that you do support something that the government. Oh yeah. So all the stuff we've mentioned, right? You need to do one of those things like, hey, I like what you're doing. Hey, I don't like what you're doing. Or, hey, you could do this, right? That's obviously big. You'll lose 5 points if you don't do that. The other thing you need to do is you have to, again, with the definitions, right? Define biodiversity. And now here's another big thing too. You have to make it obvious how your idea impacts biodiversity. Or if it's not your idea, what they are already doing, right? What are they doing that's impacting biodiversity? How is it impacting it? And regardless if you support something the government is doing or not, oh yeah, sorry. I'm trying to be quick here and I'm messing this up. Make it obvious how your idea, so if you have an idea of something the government can do that they're not already doing, make it obvious how that idea would impact biodiversity. Or if you support something the government is doing, or excuse me, regardless if you support something they're doing or not doing, or if you have another idea, you need to make it obvious how that idea will impact biodiversity. So in other words, what I'm saying here, and even I got confused myself because I was going so quickly. Use that bullet point as a way to think. You are writing to an elected official and you need to sell them on it. So don't just do one sentence like, all right, this is what biodiversity is. And then one sentence like, this is why it's important. And then one sentence where it says, this is how this affects biodiversity, right? Really sell them like you would if you were writing to an elected official. Why? Really talk about why is biodiversity important. Really talk about how this idea impacts it. Yeah. So any questions about what's expected for your initial post? All right.
So we won't use sources in this then? Like you don't want us to list sources because it's an actual letter?
No, you'll definitely, you'll still use sources. Yeah. You'll still use sources. And you would even do it the same way. And as a matter of fact, I would even recommend that when you're writing a real letter to your elected officials. Now, granted, it'd probably be an email letter and not a formal letter, but still, I would expect you, if you're really trying to sell your senator or your congressman or whatever, you would write a well-written letter. And in your paragraphs, you would have this is why biodiversity is so important. According to this website, blah, 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 blah. According to that website. Yeah. So great question. Yeah. So for your reply, again, basically you're just going to reply as if you were the elected official. Where are we at? Here we go. Choose one student and respond to their letter as if you were the legislator. In your response, you should first acknowledge the portions of the letter you agree with. So I don't care if you agree or not, at least for the sake of this academic assignment, I want you to agree with it. So if you want to, just look and look and look until you find one that you actually do agree with, if that makes you feel better. But yes, find one that you agree with, or if there's something you agree with it, right? And then here's where it gets a little bit harder. Then you actually have to go against what they're saying. And this is just a great academic exercise, because even if it's something you agree with, you're gonna have to pretend like, you'll acknowledge the parts that you do agree with, but then you want to describe why their idea is not a good idea. And I will say this too, even though it's not really pushed too much, but anyway, your disagreement could be something that's not about the environment, right? So when you acknowledge the parts you do agree with, you're like, yeah, that's a great idea. It'd be great to save biodiversity by doing this, that, and the other thing. But then, for example, you could say, but where are we going to come up with the money to do that, right? And then go into detail about budgets and all that. So anyway, yeah, that's it. And then again, really quickly looking here, try to be careful with errors, write it in the formal letter format. Again, make sure you point out the parts that you agree with, point out the parts that you disagree with, and then make a good explanation. And yeah, so that's it in the nutshell for the discussion. Any questions about how the discussion is going to go? All right. Lab 4, there's 2 versions of this, and the reason I have 2 versions is version 1 uses it's a virtual experiment, and so often this website doesn't even work. So by the way, if you try to do this version and it doesn't work, then just do the other version. You don't even need to email me, just do the other version. That's why there are 2 versions. Anyway, what you'll do is you'll use this website. Looks like it might be problematic already. Yep, page not found. Well, okay, I won't even talk about this. I'll look into it again, as I do every semester, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the things to point out, if you happen to do this, once again, I'm going to ask for screenshots to prove that you went through this virtual experiment. Yeah, I'm not going to spend any time wasting your time. Again, a screenshot. Again, a screenshot. Yeah, so pretty straightforward. But again, it appears not to be working still. So I don't want to waste any more time talking about a non-working lab. So let's talk about the one you're more likely to do. This one, we're basically talking about biomes. So you're going to watch a quick little video and then answer this question to prove that you watched the video. So let me talk about this very briefly. Describe the video you just watched with at least 3 sentences. Pretend you're grading this, right? What information would you be looking for? So again, write that as if you're sitting in my seat, and like, what could you write that would prove, or at least provide evidence that you actually watched the video? Sort of like you have to do for this extra credit meeting that we're doing right now. Yeah. So after that, you're going to read through these different types of biomes. It's all in your textbook. So you should be familiar with tropical rainforest, tropical dry forest, savanna, desert, chaparral, temperate grassland, temperate deciduous forest, temperate coniferous forest, so on and so forth, right? You can read all about them, read it in the textbook, read it here. To be honest, you can skip this if you want. This just gives you some comparisons between some metric and standard, like again, Celsius versus Fahrenheit or millimeters versus inches, just so you're familiar with it. Because later in this lab, you're going to have to put some data in, and your data is going to be all in Celsius and millimeters. And not that you need to know what those mean in Fahrenheit and inches, but it's nice to know. Like otherwise, you're just putting down numbers and it doesn't mean anything to you. So here we go. Let's talk about some common mistakes that are made. I provided you with a list of places. Well, first of all, there's Institute, and this is the example. So Institute is in a temperate deciduous forest. Then you're going to put your location, and then you're going to, use this list above to determine where do you think you are. If you think you live in a temperate deciduous forest, put temperate deciduous forest there. Here's where it gets tricky. It's not meant to be tricky, but people seem to mess this up all the time. Other than temperate deciduous forest and whatever it is you choose, there's only going to be one biome for each of these. Right? So for polar ice, you should only write polar ice once. Anywhere here below, you should only write polar ice once. You should only write desert once. You should only write tropical rainforest once. So each one of these, there's one location per biome. Other than these three, because you're also going to choose 3 places that you want to look at, right? So we have these places that I chose for you, and then you get to choose 3 places. But so again, let me be very clear here. Right here, there's only going to be one biome per location. And I've already put little highlights there that say that. I'll even do it again. One biome per location. So yes, please don't mess that up. Oh, excuse me. I better go check the screen, make sure we're still recording. Everything looks good. Okay. Another thing really quickly here, and you can see this note here. When you choose a place, be specific. Like notice these are all cities, right? I didn't just say Canada. It says Quebec, Canada, right? I didn't just say Greenland. It said that place that I don't know how to pronounce Greenland, right? So when you put a place, be specific, at least a city, right? Don't put something like Africa, Asia, Australia, right? Because there's so many different biomes in each of those 3 continents. So be very specific. Any questions about your predictions here? All right. And then this is a little bit easier. Once again, you just have all these places, which has the highest temperature, which has the lowest temperature. Again, you're just guessing. It's pretty straightforward. Then you're going to use this website to find out your answers. And I'm only going to do this one example because this is also recorded. There's a video embedded in here. Yeah, this video right here is basically going to show you what I'm about to show you, but slower and in more depth. So here we go. We wanted to know about Institute, West Virginia. So I'm typing that in and incorrectly. There it is. All right. So I can see here, this is a temperate deciduous forest. So I would write temperate deciduous forest here as I have. Now here's the part where it's up to a little interpretation. Now it's asking for the average maximum minimum temperature. So I'm looking here, and this is where people get screwed up. So don't mess this up. If we're looking at the temperature, let's see, that's over here. Let's see. So that's the dots. The temperature is the dots, and the precipitation is the lines. So we're looking at these dots, not these lines. So the average, I would say, ranges from, if I had to guess, I don't know, -1, -2, up to, I don't know, 25. So let's take a look. So -2 up to 23, right? Does that make sense? You see where I got those numbers, right? How I say it ranges from about -2, because again, we're talking temperatures, so we're using numbers on the right. So -2 to about 23. You good there? I take the silence as a yes. All right. So then again, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Then for the precipitation, you're going to look at this. Now, again, we're talking about the bars, first of all, not the dots. And also we're looking at the numbers on the left, right? Precipitation is on the left, temperature is on the right. So these bars, I'm thinking that looks to me like, I don't know, Obviously, there's somewhere between 0 and 150. We can see that easily. But if I had to guess, I'm thinking that's what, as low as 50 maybe. No, excuse me, up to 150. So I don't know. Half of 150 would be 70. That's a tough one. Uh-oh. Well, check this. Make sure I see somebody else. Hey, we have somebody else here. Good. Anyway, 75 to 140. Yeah, that sounds about right. 75 to about 140. So yes, because look, half of 150 is 75. So that would make sense that 75 is the lower number. And then it's not quite up to 150, but you could see how that would be up to 140. Okay, glad you're back. So anyway, yes, I'm not going to go through this whole thing. And oh wait, sorry, one more thing. So that's the temperature, that's the precipitation. And again, let me reiterate this. To do the temperature, you're looking at the dots, not the lines, and you're looking at the numbers on the right, not the left. And to do precipitation, you're looking at the lines, not the dots, and you're using the numbers on the left, not the right. Now, really quickly, and then we'll almost be done with this. We want to know the species richness and the number of endangered and critically endangered species. And I'm going to fix that because that's really irritating me. There we go. So to do that, and pay attention here, you need to do the bottom left where it says more info. There we go. And we want, I think, wildlife, if I remember correctly. Let's see. No, that's, oh, yeah. No. Here we go. Threat level. See, it's also been a while since I've done this. Maybe it's under description. No. Wildlife 2020. Bear with me, guys. Endangered and critically endangered species. There we go. So if you click on this, right, threat level filter, there's 0 critically endangered species and 0 endangered species. Now, if this table is a little bit bigger, you could also put vulnerable, which is 1, near threatened, which is 3, and then least concerned, which is 54. Speaking of which, and this is the first time I've said this, because I've just now thought of it. So regardless of what I say in this video, this is your lab. So for extra credit, if you want to like put a little column over here and then right click it and insert a column, where are you at? Insert column right, and then put, I don't know, number of vulnerable, right? So you could add that to it if you want and get extra credit. So that's up to you. Anyway, any questions about how you're going to get the data for this table? All right. And of course, again, I'm requesting that you use this website, but just in case, if for some reason you've already looked at things like this and you're very familiar with another website, I guess go ahead and use another website, but make sure you include it here so I know I have to use that to grade your data. So any questions about that? All right. So once you've done that, right, at this point in the lab, you've already put down your hypotheses, predictions, then you've collected your data. Now it's time to analyze your data to see if your hypotheses are correct. And that's all this is. Very quickly, very simply, right? You're going to say, what was your hypothesis and was it correct? So well, I thought Yuma had the highest temperature and I was correct or I was incorrect, right? That's all it is. Just make sure you realize these are basically 3-part questions. What was your hypothesis? Was it correct? Which one had the highest temperature? Which one had the lowest temperature? So on and so forth. Then for graphs, you get to choose what you want to make. You should do a graph showing the temperature ranges of each location, a graph showing the precipitation range of each location, a graph showing the number of species of each location, and a graph showing the number of endangered and critically endangered species for each location. So that's your choice. Choose whatever you want. Part of your grade for the graph is going to be determining what kind of graph you should use for this. Because at this point, we're in the halfway point of the semester. So you should be able to know, and I'll go ahead and tell you just to make it easier, you're either looking at a line graph or a bar graph. So forget about, pie graphs or anything like that. Just line graph or bar graph, and think about the data that you've collected and think about what I'm asking you to graph and choose the correct type of graph. And again, you've already learned how to make a graph in the first lab. You can go back and look at it there. And again, I know I just said bar graph, but depending on your source, it might say something like column chart or whatever. But I think you understand what I'm talking about. And if you don't, just let me know. Once again, make sure you save it as a PDF before you upload it. If you don't know how, click that. It'll tell you how. I think that's it. Yeah. So are there any questions about this week's lab? and then we're almost done because then we're just going to really quickly talk about the exam. All right, I'll take the silence as there's no questions. So let's look at the exam. Exam 2. This is the midterm exam. Actually, there's nothing much new to say about this. First of all, as always, you have 50 minutes to take it. Let me point this out. Some people mess this up. Because of the way these questions are written, for this exam, you will not be able to return to a question once you have progressed to the next page. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but it is the way it is. So be sure to complete all the questions before you click the next button. You cannot go back, so don't flag something with the intention of coming back to it. I'm sorry. I wish I could get around it for this exam, but I can't. That being said, if you don't want that to happen, then we can meet online like we are right now. And then as long as I can tell that you're taking a closed book exam, then I don't care about this, and I can fix that for your particular exam. Likewise, I don't care if it takes you 50 minutes or 150 minutes, whatever. I don't care how long it takes you. If we're meeting and I can see you and I can see your screen and I can hear you and I know you're taking a closed book exam, I don't care how long it takes you to take it. So just make sure you let me know within the next couple of days if you want to do that. Like I said, we can just meet like we are right now. And then finally, the last thing I have to say about that is if you go here, let's go to the announcements, like today's announcement, for example, because some people missed this last time. If you go to the announcements, you can see in this most recent post that I have provided you with the study guide. There it is. So find the study guide here, right? Just use that study guide. Every single question on that exam is basically accounted for in this list of 50 things. Now, they're not going to be written like this, right? So there's not going to be one that says, about when did Homo sapiens begin to migrate out of Africa? But there will be a question that's asking the same thing, just in a different way. And once again, a good time to remind you, even though it's right here on the study guide, you can see it. One of the methods I use to combat cheating is to make the questions that seem like they don't make sense. Again, because I know there's apps where people cheat. So just focus on the question and ignore the nonsense. If you see a question that has red letters, just read the red letters and ignore everything else. All right. So instead of a question saying, which of the following is the definition of demographic transition model, the question will probably look like this. Define the word in red and ignore the rest. And then boondoggle shenanigan, right? Just a bunch of words, but you know that you need to read the one in red and answer the one in red. I have had one student who is colorblind. So if that's your situation, let me know. And we'll work around that. So are there any questions about the exam or anything for that matter? Because at this point, we are now done talking about the mistakes from chapter 3 and done talking about module 3 and done talking about what's expected of module 4. So do any of you have any questions? All right. The last word for attendance, since Tang has been an attendance word before, let's use Terry. Terry is the last word for attendance. And if you think of anything else you need, let me know. Like I said, today is election day, so I've got these kids. I'm unfortunately not going to be doing much work, but I'll try my best. So if you need me, let me know, and I'll try to be there. Oh, yeah. And again, one last time, I haven't said this in this particular video, so I'll say it again because I like saying it. You don't have to do any of this alone. If you've written a post for your discussion, why not just meet me online really quickly? Let me look it over and tell you how you can make it better. Same thing for a lab. Let me just look it over really quickly before you upload it. This will save me some time. This will save you some time. This will help your grade. So yeah, take me up on that offer, please. And then finally, also don't forget, speaking of meeting me online, if you meet me online to discuss any of your other graded assignments, you can get a 5% boost to that assignment, right? So if you want to talk about your lab that you've already done and it's been graded, I will talk to you about it in depth. And then you'll get a 5% boost to your grade. Now, granted, there are a few exceptions. Like if you have 100%, it's possible there's nothing to talk about because you did get 100%. But sometimes even if you got 100%, you may have scored enough to get perfect grade, but you still could have some room for improvement. So just let me know. And again, the last word for attendance is Terry. And do you have any more questions or any questions?
No questions here.
All right. In that case, I'm going to.
You're gone.